Are you new to the reef keeping hobby? Just started up a tank or thinking about starting up your first reef tank? If you are, then watch this video because I'm going to be talking about 3 essential reef keeping tools that you should not cheap out on. Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome to Coral Reef Keepers. If you are a subscriber, welcome back and hello. If you are not and you are new to the channel, hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about 3 essential tools that you should not cheap out on when either A, just getting into the reefing hobby, or B, picking up everything you need to start your very first reef tank. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Alright, so for number 1, it's going to be one of the most important pieces of equipment you first buy when starting up a brand new saltwater aquarium, and that is the tool you use to measure salinity with. One of the most important things obviously is measuring how much salt is in your saltwater aquarium, and you need a tool to measure that. This is definitely one of those tools you don't want to cheap out on. Most people go to the store and the first thing they are going to buy is something similar to this. This right here is an instant ocean hydrometer. It's plastic, it's got a little swing arm inside, and basically how this works is you fill this with aquarium water and the needle will float depending on how much salt you have in the water, and it'll give you kind of a reading. The problem with these is over time they become inaccurate. A, because they get dirty, kind of like this one is. I haven't used it in years, but I just happen to have it laying around. And they get dirty, filled with salt if you don't rinse them properly. They also are prone to microbubbles, giving you inaccurate readings, and just overall they're fairly inaccurate. Although cheap, and it will get the job done, it's not very good to cheap out on this. You want to get something decent right off the bat so you can know what your salinity level is, because that's one of the most important things in the reef keeping hobby. So what I suggest is go for something like this. This is a refractometer, and you can find these anywhere from like $30 to $50. So they're a little bit more than those cheap hydrometers, but this is going to do the job way better. If you really want to step up your game, you can go for something like this. This is a salinity checker by Hand Instruments. Runs you about 70 bucks. It's a digital screen, real easy to read. You just turn it on, stick it in the water, let it do its reading, and it'll give you a nice readout right here on the screen of exactly what your salinity is. So definitely, first thing, don't cheap out and buy one of these cheap plastic things. Get yourself a decent way to measure the salinity in your tank. Okay, tool number 2 that you do not want to cheap out on is going to be a way to measure the temperature of your water. Because temperature goes along with salinity. You want to keep it stable. You want to keep it within a degree or 2 at all times. So stay away from the sticky thermometers that you see in the pet stores that go in the glass. They don't even really measure the temperature of the water. All they're doing is measuring the temperature of the glass, which can vary wildly from what the actual water temperature is inside the tank. The little cheap LCD ones you get, the digital ones, they're about $5-6 bucks anywhere you look for them. Battery powered, it's got a little black pod and it's got a little temp probe that goes in the water. While those are easy to read, I find them to be rather inaccurate. I've gotten a couple that are pretty good, but I've also gotten a lot that are really bad with, and we're talking off with a 2 to 5 degrees, which is pretty bad when you're trying to keep a stable temperature between 1 and 2 degrees at all times. So what I would recommend is go for a temperature controller of some sort. You can go check out a temperature controller called Inkbird. I use that on my nano tank upstairs, and I'll leave a link in the description below to that. And basically you plug your heater into that. The Inkbird has its own temperature probe that goes in the water, and I find that accurate within a half a degree. And what it does is it'll turn on and off as your set range. So if you have it set to 78 degrees, it'll turn off at 78 and turn on 77. And what you do is you plug your heater into the Inkbird controller and you turn your heater up to like 82, 83 degrees, so it'll always turn on when the Inkbird turns on. Another good way to measure temperature, if you bought one of these to measure your salinity, this also measures temperature and is fairly accurate. I did find it to be off about a half a degree from my Inkbird and my Apex controller, but within a half a degree that's fairly accurate for this. Anything else, I would go for some scientific grade. You can buy, Hand Instruments does have just regular temperature probes, and there's some other ones out there I'll leave some links in the description below as well for those. You want to have accurate temperature readings, and you want to make sure your heater's heating to an accurate temperature, because you don't want to rely on the internal thermometer of your heater, because most of them are very inaccurate. So you want to be able to measure and adjust your heater with a good temperature probe. So definitely do not cheap out on a thermometer. Get something good. Alright, so my third and final tool that you should not cheap out on is going to be a water test. And that basically goes for all water tests. Most people are going to go out and the first thing they're going to buy that they're going to see in like PetSmart or Petco or anything like that is going to be the API test kits. The API test kits, they work all right, but for more accuracy and, you know, better use, I tend to stay away from these. If you're just getting started up and that's all you can afford, because about 40 bucks will get you a whole kit, which will read your ammonia, your nitrate, your pH. It's a good way to start, and at least you're testing your water, so that's always a start. But if you want to do it right, spend some extra money and get some quality test kits. The APIs, they work okay. They've been around forever, and they're a lot of people's go-to first tests, but I find them fairly inaccurate over time, and the color charts are really hard to read, and they're just overall, once you start wanting to keep corals and stuff like that, I would not rely on API for my water tests. For other test kits, I would go with something like a Red Sea test kit or a Salifert test kit. They both make quality kits, and they vary in the quality depending on what you're testing. Some test certain elements better than others, as you'll find out as you buy them and use them, or just being on forums and watching YouTube videos like me. Another thing that I always recommend is getting into the Hanna checkers. These are great little testers. You know, they kind of idiot-proof testing your water. You follow the directions, you use the tube, and it checks it with a little beam of light on the inside, and it'll give you a digital reading of every test. So you don't have to sit there and try to find out what color it is and match it to the color on the chart. You just follow the instructions on the test sheet, put them in there, and you'll get a digital readout. Now these run about 50 bucks a pop, and they only do one test, so you're talking quadruple the cost of getting like an API kit, but over time these are going to save you a bunch of headaches. The only problem with the Hanna checkers that I ever have is that they are real picky on how you use them, so you got to make sure that when you're doing the test that you're doing them the exact same way every time and following the directions to a T, because if you don't, sometimes these checkers are very sensitive and they don't register. They can register a fingerprint or a smudge or something like that, as even as small as a bubble will screw up the test. So if you get into these, definitely make sure that you read the directions and follow them carefully and perform the test as accurately as you can every time you use them. So overall, definitely don't cheap out on a test kit. You know, if you want to get an API just to start and get you through the cycle period of your brand new tank, that's great. They work good for that, at least to show you where your ammonia, nitrate, and nitrate levels are as far as your cycle goes. But once your cycle's over and you start adding fish and corals, definitely spend some money on some better test kits, especially when you start testing magnesium, calcium, alkalinity, even nitrates. I find the API nitrate test kit to be terrible. I like to use the Red Sea one. It's a lot more accurate and gives me a better grasp on the water quality of my aquarium. So that's it for my top 3 essential reef keeping tools that you should not cheap out on as a beginner. If you're new to the channel and you like this video, please feel free to click the subscribe button, click the like button. Your support is much appreciated. Also feel free to check me out on Instagram. You can find that in the link in the description down below. I'm always posting pictures of my tanks and corals and stuff like that. And again, thanks for watching Coral Reef Keepers, and we'll see you on the next video.